we're live. G'day and welcome to the realm, property realm that is. And today we've got a very interesting topic. It's the election, as you can see there up on the screen. No, not that dude. He's not running for anything worthwhile in office, but we will be hearing from him very shortly. And we're talking about promises, politicians and property on today's show. As you can see, it's a full house. Well, it's not. You can't see it because you can't see them. Realmers, where are you? Where are you? Come and join me. Here we are. We got full house today, and we've got a bunch of noise. Someone's got some noise happening there. I wonder who that is. Is there someone moving house or something behind the scenes? All right, so today's panel, we have the usuals. We've got Karen, we've got Theo, we've got Remo's chair, and we've got Ross joining us today, and we've got Michael Daly. So Ross and Michael are a couple of guests we've got on today because we're talking specifically about politics, promises and property. All right, so I've got a lot of background noise there. Has anyone else got background noise happening?
Yeah.
What is that noise? It sounds like someone's trying to dig through the computer. All right, so let me kick off. We want to discuss today what's happened. The election's been called, right? It got called on Sunday. We all knew it was going to happen. There's a couple of things I want to make note of on the show today. Firstly, normally the property market dries and dies, okay? So it normally tanks in an election year and it's normally all over Red Rover. We're not seeing that this year. We're seeing it still keep going at this point. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what promises have been made and what implications are they going to have. So let's see what that comes out as we go there. I think it's actually, there we go. Might be Michael's end with a bit of noise. I just muted him. So we muted on there. All right, so what I've got here is I want Ross and specifically shortly Michael to give a bit of background on why I've called him in for today. So let's hear it from you, Ross, first. Mate, I'll unmute you and tell us a bit about why you have a right to comment on the politics and property side of things.
Well, thanks, Scott. I guess I've been involved in politics for a long time, mostly at a federal level, and have was on the vice chairman for Alex Somalay's seat on the Sunshine Coast of Fairfax for about 6 years, and I've also at a state level for state LNP have done some campaigning and booth work. So that would then, I guess, give you an idea of which way I lean. But I do have postgrad qualifications in sustainability, and I am somewhat green in my thoughts, but can't vote for the Greens because they can't form parliament. So not much point voting that way. But so I guess I'm fairly central, and I think follow politics pretty closely, or as a student of the market.
All right, it's good. And I'll just unmute Michael here. Michael, mate, you got fairly involved in politics. Tell us a little bit shortly about your background there.
So my history has traditionally been in campaigning as well. I've run campaigns for the Brisbane City Council electorates, state level electorates and federal electorates, historically based around Greater North Brisbane. So, been doing that for just shy of 20 years.
Yeah. All right. So if we want to know any form of gossip about anything, do we just call you up and say, hey, mate, what's really going on? Is this how it works?
Mate, there's a certain level of public speak and private speak, and it's not hard to translate the public speak to private speak from time to time.
All right. Well, that's actually an interesting segue. We might jump straight into that. So, okay, so we've got normal four commentators on there, including myself, a couple of newbies. So let's go down this track. The promises that come out, right? We're hearing a lot of stuff every election year. It's always the same. And this time I'm going to propose it slightly different. Last time Labor came in with their whole no negative gearing thing, and they kind of just screwed it all over for themselves probably. Whether they acknowledge that or not, I have no idea. So that election aside, there's always talk about things for the voters, okay? I'm not going to say it's specifically property-related strategies, but it's definitely things for the voters. So is this all talk, or is this actually something that really happens? Ross and Michael, you're probably best to talk about that.
Well, I think maybe if I just jump in first, you just mentioned negative gearing, and it's a football that gets kicked around all the time. And something we saw on the TV last night, the media was both sides promising, increased affordable housing and social housing, but really, the investors under the negative gearing scheme are the people that provide rental properties. The government itself doesn't actually own rental property assets as such, and most of the social housing is handled by churches or not-for-profits. So, there's got to be some sort of tax break structure, whether it's via the charities or a negative gearing program. Otherwise, there's just no supply of rental housing at all. So I don't know if you want to jump in there, Michael.
Yeah, so during the last election, the Labor Party come out with some pretty aggressive policies in relation to investment properties. And if you listen to the various pundits, notwithstanding some of the other issues, it was a major contributor to why they lost the election, and especially in Queensland. So, it's a tough space for anyone to go into and try and make changes, because those changes will reverberate through the marketplace and impact everybody. So it's one of those things where if you're going to tread into it, you need to tread very carefully.
Yeah, I think just adding to that, the investment returns, particularly on social and affordable housing, are quite low. And as Anthony Albanese now knows today, the base rate's 0.1%, and it doesn't really get much lower than that. So if interest rates do rise over time, the pressure on serviceability via rental is going to make affordable housing less affordable. So it's really something that has to be serviced by tax breaks one way or another. And obviously the NRAS scheme started, I think, about 12 years ago now. There's some of the 10-year ones have already fallen off the end of the program. So yeah, there could be an NRAS 3.0 perhaps, or something else.
Okay, so Remo and CEO, when you're talking to our partners and clients, etc., are they making decisions based on what's spewing out of the politicians' mouths, or is it something else? They're just going on as business as usual, don't really care. What have you guys been finding?
I'm finding that a lot of people don't make decisions based on it, based on the crap that comes out of politicians' mouths. No disrespect to them, but I think a lot of people find it very hard to believe people do what they're going to say they do. So I think for the people that I'm talking to at the moment, it's just business as usual.
Yeah. CEO?
Yeah, I'd say the same. Very much business as usual, and we find that a lot of property owners and property investors are dealing with the after effects as opposed to making decisions pre or based on potential impacts. So they're reactive to the politicians' decisions as opposed to being proactive to it. From what I'm seeing from clients, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different now, right? Because where the property market's at the moment, we've had our first wave of property going up and this big increase in property prices. I think we're about to go into a second wave. I think, Scotty, the conversation we had 2 days ago, you and I, was normally around election time. Everything sort of slows down and people stop buying and spending money on property. But I haven't seen it this year. I think it's quite the opposite. Everybody's just full force going, there's a deal out there somewhere to be had for absolutely everybody, and everybody's looking for that deal still. I don't think, unfortunately, because of everything we've been through in the last 2-3 years and the decisions that were made, I don't think people are taking this election as serious as we did every other election. I think now everybody is just like, because of what we've been through, everybody's just like, they're purely making decisions based on their personal circumstances, what they can't afford and what they want to do. So yeah, I think it's very different from anything I've seen before.
Yeah, and look, that's right. I mean, in an article we sent on the weekend, the comment I made was that the corona event is so much larger than any election. Have we actually stopped pegging our lives to an election because now we just don't care? And besides the fact of are we going to see anything fundamentally different no matter who gets into power? Now, it doesn't mean it changes who you vote for, but I think that people just go, well, it's just going to be more of the same or whatever it might be. Unless you vote for Palmer United, because they're going to cap interest rates for 3 years, I believe. And I think that's a very interesting take. Michael, have you got anything to say about that? As an insider, how would they cap interest rates for 3 years, Michael?
Listen, not to speak ill of people, but I don't think that policy's really gone through the rigorous process of how does one implement this that one would normally get out of a major party, to be honest.
You're being very diplomatic there. It's almost very political in your answers there, Michael. That I can see it dripping on your lips exactly what you're thinking. It's look, I don't mind some of the things that these the other parties come out with, like Hanson and Catter and what have you, and United. But you kind of got to work on how these things are priced, right? And this is kind of the discussion we're talking about right now. When the politicians talk about things, how much thought has gone into them? Is it just a soundbite, or is it actually being priced into their budget, or is it just a vote-grabbing comment? Like, how does it work?
Well, I think there's a whole generation of economists that are going to be wondering who's going to take the lead providing economic advice to the nation if the Reserve Bank becomes the third arm of politics and not an independent institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way it generally works is you'll submit a raft of ideas to a group of people, and they sit down and they work out the viability of it, how you implement it, cost it, etc. And then they're put on a sheet of paper, and someone goes through, ranks them on a sheet of paper, and then you draw a line where you take a view as to where you the spending commitment you can meet. So that's generally how it's supposed to happen. But both the Labor and the Liberal Party and the miners have, from time to time, shot from the hip in a press conference, and everyone else sits around behind the scenes and tries to work out how to make it work.
Hang on, sorry, we've got our mate Michael jumping on here saying Clive Palmer, big guy, big promises. Yes, that's true. And of course, he's commenting on the important stuff. I should have kept the beard. Well, I got hot and I got over it and I decided to shave, Michael, if you really want to know what's going on. So I couldn't cut the mustard in the kitchen as a real man, it would seem. All right, so Remo, what were you going to jump in and say, mate?
Oh, no. I was just saying, so one guy just gets up and thinks, oh, this is a great idea. I'm going to put this in. And then he's got a whole team behind him that goes, oh, this guy just made a promise. How are we going to make this work? Is that is that what you're saying?
It happens. It happened in the last federal election. The Labor Party were completely prepared for something that Shorten said in a press conference. And it basically, he's like, yeah, no, we're going to do this. And everyone just went, are we? Okay. Let's go see if we can work that out. Scott Morrison did it as well. And literally they just get nailed in a press conference and then they make a decision and everyone's just like, okay, we're doing this. Sure.
So how long ago, if you guys can think back, cast your minds back to every election that we had, how long ago were we in the current property cycle straight in the midst of an election? Like, if you look at what they're promising now, and based on the fact that we're going through a massive boom in property, does it really matter what promises they put into place? Is it really going to matter in the big scheme of things? Is it really going to impact the decisions that people are making? Like, if they come up with some negative gearing policy and this, that, and the other, I mean, I don't see many properties being negatively geared at the moment purely because of this massive boom, right? So is it going to matter in the bigger scheme of things?
I did a bit of research before this, and what Labor was bringing in for negatively gearing last year was going to add something like $10 billion into the coffers. So that's how much from everyday mum and dads who negatively gear maybe an investment property we're going to lose. So when you make promises like that, and there was also something with capital gains, and that impacts upon millions of people as well. So when you make such promises like that, that can affect millions, like I think it's something like 2 million Australians. That's a fair whack of people, and then they do pay attention to the election promises, because if that comes in, it could have a $10 billion effect upon their tax return over all of us come tax time. So when you make promises like that, which is, as Michael said, possibly part of the reason why a lot of people said, yeah, I don't think we'll vote you in. And you'll notice this year, I mean, we're only 2 days into the election, but really it's been going on for about 6 months. Nobody's making any big promises at the moment because they've all learnt from last election that it pretty much costs Labor, not the only thing, but pretty much costs Labor because they were making huge changes to property with capital gains and negative gearing, and it affected millions of voting people.
Yeah.
And none of it I could see was to their advantage other than to the government's bank account. So if they make huge changes like that, then yes, I think we will all pay attention. But at the moment, it's a bit wishy-washy because nobody's game to make any big announcement because it sort of lost the last people the election.
Remo?
So can we get Michael to just put it in someone's ear to just completely wipe out CGT, and then we'll see a big influx in funds coming into the property industry? Give it a bit of a bigger boost.
Mate, I've been advocating for a strategic change on land tax and a strategic change on capital gains tax for many years. And stamp duty is a big part of that as well. I've been a significant advocate in the background for material changes in the way stamp duty works because I just feel like it's a tax on people moving homes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
You've got the backing of RPA behind you now, so let's keep pushing.
Yeah, that's it. And the branding of Scotty North. All right, so in my opinion, we've got sort of 4 types of people when we talk to them as politicians, right? So we've got renters, we've got homeowners, we've got people that can be renters, like as in first home buyers, so they might want to be out of renting, okay? And then we've got investors. So there's probably 3 to 4 categories, depending how you want to classify renters. Are they going to be owners one day or not? So let's just say they are. I just want to rent forever, so they want to be a renter. So with that in mind, there's got to be a limited amount of things that you could do that would appeal to everybody, right? Because you've got investors on one side, renters on the others. You've got homeowners on one side and people who don't own a home on the others, as in first homeowners. So they're kind of like everything you're dealing with is polar opposites. So what can be done from a political perspective that kind of tickles everybody's ears? And I think it's really limited. And I guess as a homeowner, right, I don't necessarily care too much if they want to help new homeowners into the market. So that's why they focus a lot on the first homeowner grant because, you know, property is a fundamental part of life and blah, blah. But after that point, you start getting into modifying the tax system. You've got other sort of programs or grants or whatever that come in, like the NRAS thing and all that. And it starts to get a bit sort of tweaky, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, they're only targeting their advertising and promotions to 30% of the population. 35% will probably vote one way and 35% will probably vote the other. It's just the 30% in the middle, and the closer they are to the middle, the more they're going to swing. So you need to narrow that down even further and say, okay, well, you know, whose vote can I buy and who's available?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's the candidate that said that they're going to look at allowing people to use self-managed super funds to purchase a PPR?
There's come out a couple of times on that. Now, that was a proposal, I think, from both parties. Might have been Michael, but there was that Felinsky report that came out a couple of weeks ago broke that down. It was probably the best way that I've seen break down in terms of how to use a super. The idea of using super before was people could tap into their super and use it as a deposit, whereas the Felinsky report came out and suggested that if they had super, they could use it as a bond. So they couldn't touch the super, but they could use it as a connected bond as a deposit for the home. I didn't mind that idea because it meant that super stayed in super and they weren't raping and pillaging it out. So that was pretty good. But I don't think any of that's actually come through. Anyone got anything to say on that?
No, that's at this stage it's still a proposal. There's been no buy-in from any of the political leaders at this stage. In terms of the major parties, I'm not sure where we sit with the minors. The biggest issue you're going to have with that is with super, the way super works, it's protected from the world for a period of time until you retire. in theory. If you expose it, what you're actually doing is you're making a bad situation worse. So when things get bad, it's even worse, an outcome. And it probably just drives people who can't afford property into buying property, especially in that marginal space. If you see, the question is if you're in a position where you can't raise enough money to meet the repayments from super, and you expose some of your or meet your repayments from the loan, and you expose some of your super, is that actually helping you, or is that just giving you a bigger hurdle and escalating your downside?
Yeah, I agree. That's why I was always against tapping into the super to use it as deposits, because it just disappears. And that just, what's that doing? It's appeasing the people right now. It's like lip service. What's going on right now? Yes, we'll buy some votes, and I'll be long gone as a politician in 40 years when you guys come to retire. It's too bad, so sad. I might not even be alive. So that's what I sort of see how that working, and I don't think it's a great idea.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, so what we've got though is first homeowners are always big cards, right? They're big on the electoral circuit. It's getting people into houses because houses are the cornerstone of life, you know. So the first home buyer grants, albeit haven't changed a whole heap for many years, they kind of been fiddled, but some of the amounts haven't changed a whole lot. What are we seeing done with that? I mean, Karen, you looked into that today. We're looking at we've got the grants, we've got the first home buyer support scheme, which is helping them get up to 15% of deposit. You know, but they do these things and they announce them. But does it actually do anything to those people? Do we know anyone who's actually accessed these support schemes as opposed to just a first homeowner grant? Does anyone actually know anyone?
No, certainly none of our clients have done it, but
no.
We usually find with these sort of things it raises the price of the property.
Well, that's right. This is
that's
the point,
the whole
right?
Story.
Yeah. So this is where it goes. You're throwing more money at a market, and if they got leveraging ability, then all of a sudden, you know, if you got a 10% LVR and someone gives you 10 grand and you've got, you know, really good serviceability, you don't spend 10 grand more on a property. You can spend 100 grand more on a property, can't you? Because you've now got an extra 10% for the deposit. So it really can fluctuate the markets.
Yeah, but also let's put this into context. We're talking about 50,000 people being given access to a scheme with a population of 25 million. I mean, I'd be surprised if anyone in this room did know someone that's accessed it, because the percentage of the population that it actually helps is so small and so minute.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that just reiterates where it's at. So is it hot air? I mean, yes, the scheme, even if they deliver on the schemes, right, it goes through. But are these guys just talking about things that they really have no control over? Do they really have any control over what happens with property prices?
Well, as you've said before, Scotty, I can't remember the exact figures. You might remember every new, I can't remember if it was a block of land or house and land, had something like $150,000 in taxes. Do you remember? Yeah. This is a couple of years ago, it's probably more now.
Approaching 50%. It was like 40-something% of the price was
of new land.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so if you want to tackle unaffordability, who's taxing us? Yeah, councils. Yeah. I know a lot of councils have a $29,000 contribution fee, which is nothing more than just... Sorry. Which is nothing more than just a little extra tax. And that doesn't include your development application fees and all the rest. That's on top of it again.
That's right.
And then you've got the state government tax, and then it just keeps going. And that's where our unaffordability comes from, is everyone's putting their little fingers in the pie all the way through. And federal government's actually not probably one of the ones, other than the tax system at the end, the GST, who's putting their fingers in the pie. It's councils and state governments and everyone else along the way.
That's right. There's a lot of levels of government, right? I mean, there's a lot, and it probably has the argument that it says it creates inefficiencies. Very much so. There's a lot of levels of fees in there. We've got a comment here. We've got to introduce the JB Hi-Fi model. We'll all be interested in this. So stamp duty should be reduced to assist all buyers. The JB Hi-Fi model, increased turnover, still get the same dollars, could be good for the economy by more people doing renovations, etc. like that. Okay, it's a good thought there, Michael. The JB Hi-Fi model, crew, what do you reckon? What do you think about that?
Well, I think we could dedicate a whole episode on why we've got 3 levels of parliaments in council, state, and federal, and then we've got 2 houses at the federal level. So that's a whole new episode.
Well, it is, and I think the thing that we want to look at here is, and that was in that Felinski report as well, was the multi levels of government. I mean, the report itself got a lot of bad press for some of the things it said, but it had some good things in it as well. I'd encourage everyone to have a read, go back and have a read of that. So at this point, right, if they're not talking about changing the tax system through negative gearing, and they're just talking about trying to help some homeowners into the market, is the rest just like par for the course? And is this the reason why the property market really has not responded to this election, because nothing's changed? What do you think?
Empty promises.
Empty promises.
Yeah. I mean,
nobody's making any big promises at this stage.
If they do help first home owners to get into the market, it's just going to make the rental market smaller and the first and homeowners market a little bit bigger. They're not really doing anything to motivate growth in the market. They're not doing anything to build more houses and build more communities and stuff like that. Like, I think that's what we need to see more of. We need to start seeing more of councils rezoning land and giving us the opportunity to go and redevelop that land and actually add to what's currently in the market. By just putting in a policy and going, oh, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but we're not actually going to give you more of what you need. Like, how's that really going to impact us?
So Michael, in your time behind the scenes there, how much talk, when it was talking about property stuff or real estate, how much talk was related to accessibility of housing and affordability?
Not as much at a federal level. Mostly at state level and council levels was the conversation. And at council level, it's very much dedicated around what are the controversial developments that are going on. So at that level, that's discussed a lot. At a state level, we discuss, land supply, urban footprint issues, infrastructure, those types of things. It's all good and well to say we've got to have 10,000 extra people accommodated in Brisbane, but where are you going to put them? So those things are discussed at a federal level. It's mostly discussed around what are the incentives that we can offer. So, for example, the latest movement in land prices during COVID was driven by the announcement of the building scheme, where the government would chip in some money if you decided to go and start building a house. And within a month or 2 months, almost every single block of land was suddenly under contract.
Yeah, that's right.
Like just snap, everything went under contract. Good.
So we've gone back to a ballot system on some land subdivisions that I'm aware of, certainly in southeast Queensland, where the number of buyers is about 3 to 1 to availability, and that's driving up the pressure on builders to supply construction. So that's vacancy of rental properties is down as the migration increases post COVID. There'll be more people coming in, short-term workers. That is going to place some more pressure on the supply of rental and going to make things even worse. So you look at the multiple areas. You've got local government all the way through to federal migration. It's quite a complex conversation.
Mm. Yeah, it is. It is. All right. So are we in agreement that these guys talk about stuff, but there's not really a whole heap that they can possibly do anyway, in terms of, because the system's there. They got to go and price it. They got to go and activate it. They can't just necessarily knock on the RBA's door and say, don't change the rate, like Clive Palmer's proposing to do. So are we just hearing a bunch of hot air and wind?
I don't think so. I think there's a certain element of indirect impacts that the federal government can do. So we've got a skills shortage out there at the moment in a raft of industries. You can't get plumbers, you can't get carpenters, you can't get plasterers, those types of things. So there's, the government's ability to go, hey, let's bring some foreign workers in to address some of these things. Handymen are getting paid over $50 an hour now, which is pretty good money if you can get it. So those types of things the government can do. So, for example, if you want to see upward prices on property, let's start trying to bring in some more skilled tradespeople from overseas so that we can build these houses that we're struggling to finish. The federal government could get involved and start trying to fix some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing overseas with those types of things. So there are things they do to assist with managing that growth. At a certain point in time, if we've got inflation pressures from a lack of tradespeople, let's get some tradespeopeople. We address the inflation issues, and the need to raise interest rates is reduced. So, it's one of those things. It's not specifically about the direct impact; it's the indirect impact.
And I think also, Michael, supporting local manufacturing as opposed to importing certainly, complements everything you've just spoken about.
Yeah. But it doesn't sound as good as helping your homeowner's back pocket. This is the thing, right? I mean, so I think we're in agreement that there's a bunch of stuff that is probably getting done or should be done behind the scenes. But when you come to the soundbite, you got to get those voters to vote for you, and I think that's what we end up hearing in a lot of these plans and these headlines. That's all it is, clickbait.
Yeah, I think that Ross's suggestion earlier that NRAS 3.0 is a legitimate solution that they could come out that's sellable, established process structure. You can easily define the process. People know what it is. They could even look at, keep an eye out for infrastructure assistance, where to try and assist councils to build the infrastructure they need so that land can be cut up. The urban footprint is a very, very complex document that defines where, what, when, how, why you can do certain things. So there could be some really interesting things. If we see some infrastructure programs to connect and to put water and sewage and things like that to some of these global land estates, that could really drive some land supply.
That's good. Well, we got Wayne commenting, we're not going to cover this today because this is a topic for another show which we've got planned later in the year, which is a land tax instead of other taxes. Now, this is an idea that's been going around many, many times. What are they called? Prosper Australia is a lobby group, I suppose you'd call it, that are very much behind this sort of concept. And land is, Wayne is saying that if the value is captured by the land, why not implement an annual land tax on everything privately owned? Remove all other taxes, including income tax and GST. It's simple, transparent, and impossible to avoid. So the idea of that is that the land that is utilised is taxed according to the utilisation or the potential utilisation. So you'd have to pay that, which has some merit. Of course, there's many politicians that own land and houses and what have you, and that would change all that. And I don't think we'd ever see that come about because, of course, they're going to vote against themselves. But that is not today's topic. But I think a land tax is something that has been bandied around for many times. My concern with a land tax is just like the GST implementation, it was supposed to come in and remove other things, whereas I have this feeling that they'd bring a land tax in and they won't remove the other things. That's the problem. So,
well, I think the flaw of that is that all those people that are paying those taxes are the ones providing the rental properties for the people that can't afford the property, and they're bearing the tax burden. So why wouldn't you sell your property and go and get a share portfolio and avoid the land tax?
Well, it is, and the issue is that it would affect property prices. In fact, if land tax done correctly, the articles that I've read, takes property pricing to virtually zero. So that is definitely another topic for another day. But today we talked about politicians, promises and property. And thanks all for joining us. I think it was a good chat, and I think there's a couple of good things have come out of there. Any final comments from anyone?
Well, I think if we learnt anything from COVID, it was the federal government has very little say in what happens in states. So yes, it can make tax promises for property at the election, but it has absolutely no control on land, releasing land, stamp duties, all the taxes we said that go along with it, and councils and all that stuff, which is really the nuts and bolts of where our property is developed, built, and where people live. So the federal government can make all the promises about building new houses, but unless the councils and the state government actually come along with that ride, that kind of means nothing, does it?
Well, this is the thing. It comes down to there's multi levels of government, and they're all, in some regards, competing with each other. So, maybe the feds don't have as much power as they pretend that they do. All right, I'd like to thank our normal realmers, Karen, Remo, and Sio, and our guests today, Ross Williams and Michael Daly. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's it. Today we're talking about politicians, promises, and property. And if you missed any of it, you can rewind and watch it again. There's some good stuff there. If you've got any questions or comments about today's show, feel free to comment, even if it is a replay, because we will catch up with you and interact, because that's the type of people that we are. And you can always contact us on the details that have been scrolling at the bottom of the screen the whole time. You can call us at 1300 667789 or hello@propertyadvice.com.au. All right, that's it. I'm Scotty North, and we've been talking politicians, promises, and property on today's show of Property Realm. That's it from us. Till next time.